To the annual State of the State address. My name is John Heffernan, representing AT&T and serving the South Bay. I am honored to serve as this year's chairman of the board for the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce, and especially honored to share the podium today with the Torrance area's top state legislatures as they update all of us on the state issues impacting not only Torrance businesses, but also the greater Torrance community. And we're looking forward to hearing their highlights on the work that they do week in, week out up in Sacramento, representing all of us. So before we continue, though, I'd like to recognize our host, Sunrider International, for once again offering this space for our event. Sunrider's generosity and their hospitality is greatly appreciated by all of us. And representing Sunrider International, I'd like to now call up Jonathan Butler, Director of Public Affairs, to make a few short words. And actually, Jonathan is going to send his emissary, who will introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. I have actually never been called an emissary before, so that's a pleasure. So welcome this morning. Jonathan's voice is not up to the task to speak and welcome you this morning. But I want to just say that we're very, very happy to have the Chamber. We've hosted many events here before, and we want to continue doing that. So enjoy the breakfast, enjoy what I ensure is going to be a very informative discussion on political events and things going on in the state of California. So again, thank you.
All right, thanks again. You know, when I first came to Sunrider International, I thought, well, this is cool. We'll be able to see a display of some stand-up paddle boards or maybe some sunscreen or lip balm. But it was interesting to see the products that they now have on display out in the lobby. So everything from lipstick to cream to some nutritional supplements. A fantastic company and always generous with this space. As you know, this event would not be possible without the support of our sponsors. So let me first recognize our premier sponsor, Kaiser Permanente. Also several distinguished sponsors. We have Sunrider International, American Honda Corporation, Southern California Edison, the California Water Service, and Pelican Products. Give them a hand. Our supporting sponsors today, we've got the Torrance Refining Company, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, Ganal Lumber, UCLA Health, Torrance Memorial Medical Center, El Camino College, Malaga Bank, and Red Car Brewery and Restaurant. At this time, I'd like to welcome up to the stage Latrice McLaughlin, and if you would please stand as we enjoy her beautiful singing of America the Beautiful.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, or amber waves of grain, or purple mountains' majesty above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
That's the way to start off the morning. Thank you very much, Latrice. Go ahead and take your seat. Now we'd like to acknowledge the distinguished guests in attendance, so if you would, it's quite a list, so if you could please hold your applause till the end. This morning, as you know, if you saw the 473 flyers that Donna and her team put out either through social media or in the mail, today we're honored to have State Senator Ben Allen, State Senator Steven Bradford, Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi, and from the city of Torrance, the Honorable Mayor Patrick J. Fury, Councilmember George Chen, Councilmember Mike Griffiths, Councilmember Milton Herring, Councilmember Jeff Rizzo, and City Clerk Rebecca Poirier. From the city of Gardena, City Clerk Mina Semenza. From the city of Lomita, Councilmember Mark Warnick. From the Metropolitan Water District, we have Director Russell Lefevre. And from the offices of Senator Allen, we have someone who's always out and about, Olena Webro. We also have Sam Liu here from Senator Bradford's office. We have the beautiful Natal Patel. Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi's office, represented by Jake Rideow, is here. And from Assemblymember Burke's office, Brandon Stansel is here. From El Camino College, we have President Dr. Dina Maloney here. And from the Torrance Unified School District Board of Education, who give direction to all the students, we have Terry Reagans and Jeremy Gerson. And the superintendent of the Torrance Unified School District is here, Dr. George Mannon. Please give our special guests a round. At this time, I'd like to invite up Tara O'Brien, Public Affairs Director for Kaiser Permanente, as she will introduce today's first speaker. Tara?
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce Senator Ben Allen. California State Senator Ben Allen was elected in 2014 to represent the 26th Senate District. He serves as chair of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee and the legislature's Joint Committee on the Arts. He is a member of the Senate Committees on Natural Resources and Water, the Judiciary, and Government Organizations. He chairs the Legislative Jewish Caucus and co-chairs the Environmental Caucus. Ben has authored several measures that have become law, including the groundbreaking bill to boost vaccination rates among school children and a bill to assist cities with financing transportation and affordable housing development. He authored laws that protect veterans from pension scams, improve the diagnosis, treatment, and care for persons with Alzheimer's disease, and strengthen the regulation of underground gas wells. Ben co-authored the Senate's historic climate change legislation, which requires 50% of the state's energy to come from renewable resources and doubles energy efficiency in buildings by 2030. He authored bills to expand the state's efforts to combat climate change even further, including establishing the first standard to increase the use of renewable gas and reducing toxic motor oil waste. Please join me in welcoming Senator Ben Allen to the stage.
Thank you, Ms. O'Brien. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful day. And thank you so much for being here. I'm excited that this is, I think, my 5th year now at this wonderful event where we bring together friends and from all over the South Bay. And I want to give a very special thank you to Sunrider, of course, that is hosting us here today. Sunrider, the great Chen family, who've been wonderful leaders of in our community. Jonathan Butler, of course, our good friend, and who's been a great interlocutor between Sunrider and the broader South Bay community, both on the political side and the business side. The Sunrider folks, I don't know, who here knows that you're actually sitting, about 30 feet from one of the most exquisite Chinese art collections in the Western Hemisphere? So so maybe about half of you. I'm now, just to show you how I'm always working for my constituents, I'm going to pressure Jonathan Butler to open it up today for you to get a chance to go take a look inside the museum here. They also have a wonderful collection of Picasso prints. But seriously, if it's possible, it would be fantastic for you to get a chance to take a look and see the wonderful collection that they've created. And I'm chair of the Joint Committee on the Arts, right? So I have to do this. But Anyway, here we are. So my life has changed a little bit since we last saw each other. I am now the father of a beautiful little boy, Ezra Michael. He was born on October 19th, and my wife and I like to say that we have a brand new roommate who doesn't pay any rent and keeps very erratic hours, drinks all the milk. But he's a lot of fun, and Steve gets to see him all the time on the flight back and forth to Sacramento. He's a wonderful little kid, and I will say it's definitely given me a new perspective on things. People say that having a kid does that. The time horizon for a human being is so short if you think about it from the perspective of planning, from environmental policy, in terms of fiscal solvency. These are things we think about in the legislature. But the decisions that we're making now, they'll impact all of us in this room, but they're really going to impact the kids in his generation more than anyone else. The way our cities look, whether our state has enough money to finance its projects and its educational system, whether our environment is clean enough to be able to feel good about raising a child in our society. Those kinds of things, the decisions that we're making today really are going to impact one way or another. And so it gives me a stake in the future, I think, in a way that's very profound, and it's been fun kind of through my exhaustion experiencing that. So we're here to give you a little bit of a briefing on what's happening in Sacramento, and you're going to get a chance to hear from some of my colleagues as well, and each of them will give a perspective on their take on what's happening in Sacramento right now. But we've got a brand new governor in town. And it's very interesting. They're very different people, right? They have similar politics to some extent, but very different styles. I mean, the clash and contrast is fascinating, and I think we're going to see. I think you're going to see some differences moving forward because of their stylistic differences. Jerry Brown was famously focused on a few issues that he was passionate about, and he kind of let the rest of the issues get covered by various aspects of the state bureaucracy. Gavin seems to be running a mile a minute with lots of different ideas and lots of different things that he wants to focus on. There's quite a bit about it in today's LA Times, in fact. He talks about how he sweats the small stuff and how he feels like he wants to be moving forward on it in everything all at once. Of course, that's difficult to maintain. And it's difficult for administration to be running 100 miles an hour in every direction. But I will say, I do appreciate the newfound the energy, the vigor that he's bringing to the job. The other question, of course, will be on the budget, right? The state's in a relatively strong place right now, not quite as strong as we hoped when we started the year, but will he be able to hold the line? Jerry was famously very cheap, right? I mean, he one time I was at a dinner at his mansion. They had a bunch of the legislators, and he was talking about bills, and he stood up and he said, "Well, I'd love to fund this project, but I'm just so damn cheap. I just don't want to spend the money." And Gavin's made a lot of commitments in a lot of different directions when he was running for governor, and I think it'll be interesting to see, how he will, how he'll make it all work. I mean, fortunately, the economy's in a strong place, but we got to balance the budget in the end of the day, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how he makes it all happen. One of the things that happens in the legislature is that there were all sorts of bills that people had generated, things that people wanted to work on that Jerry Brown didn't like. And so those bills kind of fell by the wayside, but now that there's a new governor in town, everyone wants to test the new governor. Well, where's this governor going to be on this issue or that issue? As a normal human being, you really aren't asked to weigh in and think about and make a decision about the thousands of issues that a legislator or the governor has to vote on or sign a bill about. And if you really go look deep down in your heart, what do you really think about pawnbroker regulation? Where are you on like the renderers? Do you even know what renderers are? Where are you on the big debate between the plastic surgeons and the cosmetic surgeons? Right? I didn't even know there was a difference between them, but it turns out they hate each other. These are the things we have to grapple with in the legislature all the time, and there's all sorts of things that the governor who's never served in the legislature before, right? He was lieutenant governor with not a lot of things they have to do. Before that, there was before that he was mayor. That's a serious job, no question about it. Mayor of a big city, but different kinds of issues than you face at the state level. And so it's going to be really interesting to see where he falls on all the things that you care about, that regulating your business, regulating your industry, what sort of budgetary priorities he's going to put in place, etc. Now, speaking of budget, one of the stylistic contrasts between the two, of course, was in terms of family, right? You know, Jerry Brown doesn't have kids. Gavin's kids were running all over the stage during the inaugural address. It was a kind of a wonderful thing to watch. They're just all so, you know, impossibly beautiful. And you know, there's a newfound impact and focus on education, and on early childhood, on K through 12, and on our higher ed systems. And you know, so the governor's budget has come out with a whole slew of proposals. One that will help to pay down some of our state's pension debt, both at the CalSTRS side in particular, which is an important thing for K through 12. There's increases in spending for K through 12, which is super important. And let me give a very special shout out way in the back. They should be in the front. Our wonderful Torrance School Board and Torrance Unified School District that's over there. And just thank you guys for everything you do to educate our kids. I was a long-suffering school board member before I came to the state senate, and I served on the board, you know, during the downturn. It was a very difficult time, and it's something that's seared in my memory. Every time people want to put new constraints on the budget with new programs, I think about what's going to happen during the next downturn and who really gets the axe the worst. It's the school system, right? It's the school system that it's such a big portion of our state budget, and if we don't keep our budget under control, it'll be the schools that'll take the biggest brunt of the hit when there's the next downturn. It's one of the reasons why it's important that we've been building up this rainy day fund. It's one of the reasons why it's important that the governor's proposed to start to pay down some more of our long-term pension liability. He's also looking to put some more funding into our long underfunded special education system, which would receive some significant new investments. And of course, we have to figure out how to do that in a way that's going to be smart. He's also been looking to put a lot of emphasis on early childhood, preschool. You know, I was at an event right before he was elected governor, and he talked about how you know, he's been studying a lot about brain science, and he's really worried about his 5-year-old because, you know, he realizes how much development happens in the first 3 years, and he didn't do enough singing and reading and talking to his 5-year-old. So, you know, his life is over. But you know, for the 2-year-old, well, he's really putting in a lot of investment. So it was interesting though. He really is. He's focused on this on the importance of early childhood. And if you look at the long term, the impact that an investment in early childhood can make on the long term for a child, it really is pretty extraordinary. It really makes you wonder why we are one of the only, you know, developed world countries that doesn't have a real infrastructure for early childhood education. The wealthiest can afford it. The very poorest have access to certain programs like Head Start, which are great, but very isolated from the rest of their early childhood program. But the middle class families are so squeezed, and you know, anyone who's got a kid knows this. It's an incredibly expensive thing that we ask families to do, and you know, we don't have a good infrastructure in place to take care of those families. You know, another big issue that the governor's been focusing on is the area of housing. And I know we've got a lot of people who work in that area and the area of development. You know, we rank 49th in the country in shares of housing units per capita, 49th in the country. And we've got a population growing much faster than our collective housing stock. And you know, officials estimate that we need to construct around 180,000 new housing units annually, while on average we're building less than 80,000. And of course, Governor Newsom during the campaign talked, in fact, both the candidates, it was interesting, both John Cox and Gavin Newsom spoke consistently about how we needed to get a lot more housing online. And of course, this has provoked a lot of debates because we can all sit around and say how we all need more housing, but the devil's in the details in terms of how we get that housing online. How do you finance it? What sort of decisions do you make on the ground? And what sort of balance do you strike? Now, there are those in the legislature who are starting to question you know, some of the longstanding laws and rules that we've had in the state. Now, over the past 40 years, California has vested local governments with increasing authority over land use decisions, allowing local government to decide where and what type of new housing to permit. And as construction throughout the state has slowed, some governments have been accused of abusing this discretion to create significant regulatory barriers that block new housing from being built at all. Now, over the past 4 years, I've been serving in the legislature. State lawmakers have enacted increasingly aggressive proposals to catalyze the construction of more housing. Some of those now raising critical funding to subsidize the construction of affordable homes. Others help build and preserve more low-income housing by permitting cities to require developers to set aside a percentage whatever they construct for low-income residents. But the majority of proposals are focused on revising, rewriting, and in some cases removing the local planning authority of local governments. And there are new laws forcing cities to rezone their land. There are laws penalizing cities that deny housing projects in bad faith. There are laws providing state officials with authority to investigate and refer cities to the state attorney general when they fail to implement their housing plans. Undoubtedly, the most controversial of such laws are streamlining the housing approval process by limiting local government's ability to block certain projects that meet a set of state-defined criteria. Now, last year, our colleague, Scott Wiener, who represents San Francisco, a very different kind of city than ours, but an important one nonetheless, he proposed SB 827, which would have made it vastly easier for developers to build housing near subway, light rail, and bus stops. Any bus stop, I think, that had buses coming by during rush hour, at 15 minutes a pop or less. And it would have basically overrode city or county rules on height, density, parking requirements. The bill was hugely controversial. It received a lot of support from developers, but it got huge opposition, especially from local governments, but also from a lot of different constituencies. The bill failed, but it certainly sparked a very vigorous debate in the Capitol that I think is roiling everyone still. Now, our colleague Scott has authored SB 50. It was largely modeled upon his previous bill. It did get out of its first committee with bipartisan support earlier this month. He made all sorts of commitments in different directions. So that's one thing that's out there as something that's being discussed and debated, but it really does kind of test this issue of the extent to which we want our local communities and cities to drive the way that they look, or how much. If they're standing in the way too much of housing, how much should the state step in and override the local government's ability to restrict or control or temper housing development? And so that's been a really interesting debate in the legislature, and one that's been very difficult. And I think we're going to have to strike that balance in a proper way. My tendency has been to believe that what Scott's been doing is it just goes too far in terms of running roughshod over local control from my perspective. But maybe there's a way that we can create some sort of incentive and disincentive system that gives more flexibility to local governments while also kind of pushing local governments. And that we have to find a little bit of a sweet spot. Finding a sweet spot has been something that the Torrance Chamber has been doing for a long, long time. I want to just say, the Torrance Chamber has been very helpful to my office in helping to inform a lot of the things that we work on. We've worked together on a lot of different issues. Our work together on SoCal Rock, SCROC, the Southern California Regional Occupational Center. Al and I and Steve as well, we've worked really hard on trying to maintain that vital resource for our local South Bay community. It's not in my district, but it serves a lot of my constituents. And the Torrance Chamber has played a really important role in raising the profile of that issue. We've also worked really closely together on the LA Air Force Base, and I know this is something that all of your local delegation cares a great deal about. It's an essential linchpin of our region's thriving aerospace economy, and there's so much follow-on impact. And we've been, in fact, my great staffer here, Alina, is now acting in many respects as many different ways, but in one respect as our chief consultant for our Aerospace and Defense Senate Select Committee that's going to be looking at all of the issues facing our aerospace and aviation communities in general. But one of them continues to be how we keep the LA Air Force Base a vital and important presence here in Southern California, and taking advantage of all of the infrastructure that we have here. And I just want to thank the Chamber for its continual engagement with us on that issue. I also want to thank the Chamber for its engagement on transportation and infrastructure. The Chamber supported the controversial SB 1, the gas tax, which is not an easy thing for a Chamber to come behind and support. But I think it did so understanding that there was enormous infrastructural needs that we had as a society and as a region, and that it really was starting to impact our quality of life and also the strength of our economy. And now it's up to all of us together, but with the Chamber very much at the heart of that conversation, helping to hold the government accountable to the projects that are being built and making sure they're being done in a cost-effective way, in a timely manner, and really ultimately fight against the soul-crushing traffic congestion that we know that's just such a big part of our lives here in LA. Also worked very closely with the Chamber. I authored legislation to give transportation agencies new tools to accelerate the construction of major transit projects, including the Green Line, and bills to expedite environmental reviews of regional community plans. One of the things I'm working on a lot right now as the chair of the Environmental Quality Committee is to really take another look at the California Environmental Quality Act, which is an important act. It's done a lot of good work to protect the way our cities look and feel, and also to protect our environment. But there's no question that in some cases it is being abused. And the question is, how do we get back to the core goals of CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, while not allowing it to become a tool for one group fighting another to leverage something? I think that's been kind of at the heart of our work right now. And we've actually passed a couple bills out of our committee that gave some flexibility under CEQA as long as they met very high environmental standards. And that's going to be what I'm going to be looking for as the chair of the Environmental Quality Committee now. In the past, the Environmental Quality Committee would basically just shut down any attempt at any kind of flexibility with regards to CEQA. I don't think that's the right approach. I think we ought to offer flexibility for those projects that show a discernible environmental benefit associated with their project so that we can get more of these projects online and in a way that will actually help our communities. So those are some of the things that I've been working on. I've been working on closely with your chamber. I want to encourage you to continue to be engaged with the chamber. It really does play an important role in advocating for the voice of business, but also the voice of the South Bay. I love the fact that there's such close coordination with local government. I really do hope that, particularly on some of these really tough issues like housing and the feel and look of our cities, that maybe some solutions can come out of this community. Where there is a really good balance between a very healthy respect for business and industry, while also a strong sense of the need for a livable community where people want to live and grow a family and have a community that doesn't kind of feel out of control. And so I just continue to encourage our partners on the ground here to help us come up with some solutions to this very, very tricky problem that we're facing in Sacramento right now, which is, how do we get more housing online? How do we provide for this enormous housing crisis, this affordability challenge that we have as a region and as a state, but do so in a way that really does respect the right needs of local communities to shape the way that they grow in a way that feels comfortable to them. And that's sometimes going to be difficult. That's a tough balance to strike. And sometimes it's going to involve asking our cities to stretch a little bit. But I think if we strike that balance right, we will really serve the future well. And so with all of that, I want to wish Mark Warrenick a very happy birthday. Mark is... I said, Mark, why are you here, man? You should be on the beach with the family, hanging out. But this is part of his family, of course. Mark's such a great public servant, serves on the Lomita City Council, worked at the county level for some time, now is running his own business. And happy birthday to you, Mark. You're a good friend and a good person and appreciate your leadership. So with that, I very much appreciate your advocacy, your engagement. I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you for continuing to engage with our office and putting trust in us. I do want to introduce, I mentioned Olina, I also wanted to mention Sam. They run our wonderful district office in Redondo Beach. We are always open to you for your concerns, for your questions, for your engagement. We meet regularly with your chamber representatives, with Donna and others. But do consider us an open door. We're constantly working to help make things better for constituents. We're working on an issue with National Guardsmen who are dealing with their payments. We're helping businesses who are having problems with the Secretary of State's office, with Caltrans issues. I mean, the issues go on and on and on, and we really do want to have an open door to our community to make sure that we're being responsive to you. So thank you so much, and look forward to some questions later. Thank you.
So again, on behalf of the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce, we have a small token of appreciation for Senator Ben Allen. Thank you for making time for us.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Always vibrant, always energetic, and always looks well rested. Not easy for a new father. So congratulations, Ben. At this time, I'd like to invite up Ellen Mary Michelle. She is the queen of all things human resources for the worldwide organization Pelican Products, to introduce our next speaker, Ellen Mary.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great honor to introduce Senator Steven Bradford. Elected to the State Senate in November 2016, Senator Steven Bradford represents the 35th State Senate District, which includes Carson, Compton, Gardena, Harbor Gateway, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Lawndale, North Long Beach, Rancho Dominguez, San Pedro, South Los Angeles, Torrance, Watts, Willowbrook, and Wilmington. Yes, Senator Bradford is a lifelong public servant and citizen activist who has spent his entire career focused on one objective: to represent the communities, the neighborhoods, and the constituents to whom he serves. Senator Bradford previously served as a councilman in the city of Gardena for 12 years and as a member of the State Assembly for 6. While in the Assembly, Senator Bradford chaired the Utilities and Commerce Committee and was pivotal in authoring and passing renewable energy legislation, as well as expanding contact and procurement opportunities for women, minorities, and disabled veterans. He also served as chair of the Select Committee on the Status of Boys and of Men of Color. He had 38 bills signed into law by Governor Brown as a member of the Assembly, and 11 during his first year in the State Senate. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Senator Steven Bradford.
Thank you. Good morning. It is truly an honor to be here, and I'm always playing second fiddle to Mr. Allen, more so his son Ezra, who, as you stated, I get to see on a weekly basis. So maybe I need a newborn to have that type of energy, because Ben has more energy than probably anybody in the Senate and is really infectious, and we appreciate his comments. First, let me thank the Chamber for this invitation to provide a overview of what we're doing in the legislature. And if I was smart, I would just say ditto everything that Ben Allen stated and sit down. But just want to elaborate on some of the things that we're doing, but also want to recognize the mayor and the council for all the great work that you're doing, because really, Torrance has been a major catalyst in the South Bay of attracting businesses. It's my understanding over 590 businesses have identified with wanting to do business in the city of Torrance just this year alone, and I think that's testament to your leadership and your commitment and your openness to understanding the importance of business. Also to the Chamber of Commerce. Prior to being elected to the legislature, I worked for Southern California Edison alongside Connie Turner, and I served on 7 chambers at one time, so I know the hard work that chamber members do to volunteer your time, so your voice is critical to helping us do what we're doing, whether it's on the local, state, or federal level. So truly, let me say thank you to Donna and her leadership with the chamber as well. So give them a round of applause. Since being on the chamber board, it's a thankless job many times, but it's one that's very important and much needed in the community. As Senator Allen stated, it's a lot of things happening in Sacramento right now. Again, especially centering around, as Ben stated, our new governor and the dynamic change between how Jerry Brown governed and the way Gavin Newsom's going to govern. And as stated, I think Gavin's going to be much more hands-on on a lot of things, even though Jerry was very much in the weeds on the things that he was passionate about. And I appreciated Jerry Brown. I had a great working relationship with him. He signed numerous of my bills. I was fortunate enough last year to get 11 bills to his desk, and he signed all 11. And I appreciate that, but we've always had an understanding of where his priorities were, and he was open to that. And I'm hoping the same thing will happen with our new governor, of having a opportunity to sit down. Governor Newsom and I sat down 2 weeks ago, and we went over some of our priorities, and one of my priorities, and an issue that very few ever talk about, but it's the elephant in the room, and regardless of where you believe, where you stand on this issue, it's one that we're dealing with in California for the last 2 years, and that's legalized cannabis in the state of California. And I know it's a hush that gets over the room, but it's here. And we're gonna have to decide if we're gonna do it in a responsible manner or tuck our heads in the sand and allow the legal market to take over, and we'll never see the benefit of what this legislation was supposed to do. Again, We have to work with our federal government. I mean, it's still labeled a Schedule I drug, and I find that ridiculous because it's a plant. A drug is something that is man-made. It's the opioids that are killing people. It's the meth. It's the cocaine. It's the heroin that's on the street. But cannabis we have to accept is a plant. Now, what we do with that plant, it's a discussion to be had. But there are true medicinal benefits from cannabis, from the CBD aspects of it. Israel has done more research than any other country in the world to show the medical benefits. We've seen those from kids who were having 40 to 50 seizures a day to now taking drops and not having one seizure a day. We've talked to seniors who've had arthritis and couldn't get out to bed and now have salves that they can, and ointments that they can rub on their legs, and they're out working in the yard again. So we have to open our minds and understand that we've had medical cannabis in this state for 20 years. And now we're gonna have adult use. And we're gonna have to decide, and most of the time the discussion is about two aspects of this cannabis industry, either growing or selling. But I'm trying to tell you, it's a swath of other opportunities in between. It's the testing. Before anything hits the street, it has to be tested. And I'm trying to get communities to understand, open up a testing laboratory in your city. It could be a nondescript building, nobody knows. You're not gonna have tons and tons of cannabis coming in, and you're having samples from each plant that's being grown to be tested to find out what's in that plant. You're gonna need testing laboratories. You would want testing laboratories to make sure the product is safe before it hits the street. For, again, the medicinal use, you're gonna need commercial kitchens. For all the edible products that are on the market today, I challenge you to go into a cannabis store like MedMen. I had never gone into one until last year when I ran the diversity bill. I was blown away with the number of medicinal products that are in those stores. So we have to change our mind and our thinking about what this is, because we got to understand we have a governor who is very much supportive of that, Prop 64 2 years ago. And he has a city that was leading the nation many times in legalizing the use of cannabis. And I see the room's got quiet, but it's one that we have to have a discussion about. And it's one that, you know, if we're going to be accountable and responsible legislators, we can't run from the issues that face us. So I'm taking this issue straight on. That's why I introduced 1294, the diversity and inclusion bill last year that the governor signed, that put $10 million back into communities that have an equity program to make sure that those communities that were impacted by the war on drugs over the last 40 years had an opportunity to enter this legitimate market. Because if we don't give them a pathway to entry, we're going to continue to do the same thing. And it's going to be an underground market, underground economy. And again, the cities and the state will never see any benefit from that. Issue of another concern in this region is the new Clipper Arena. I was the author of SB 789 a year and a half ago. We weren't successful with that, but we introduced it again on the Assembly side last year with the new Assemblywoman Sydney Comlager-Dove. The governor signed it. It's going to be a new Clipper Arena built at the corner of Century and Prairie. And what does that mean to the cities of Carson, Torrance, Inglewood, the whole South Bay? It's going to be revenue for all of these communities. We've already seen the benefit of playing football down in the San Diego Chargers, and now the LA Chargers playing down in Carson. We've heard from businesses in the region, they've already seen an impact, whether you have a restaurant, a bar, people are coming in before and after the game. The same thing's gonna happen with the Clipper Arena. We're just down the street, we have the Forum, which is the #1 concert venue in the state, #2 in the nation, and we've heard from those businesses the benefits of what that's done to their economy. So I want Torrance, I want the South Bay to be ready for this new arena, and it's a lot of opposition to this arena. They talked about, oh, we're taking homes. Let me tell you, this arena is being built on property that the city of Inglewood has owned for 25 years, that they bought from the FAA 25 years ago. Why? Because it was under a flight path and you couldn't build homes there. So many times there's a lot of misinformation out there. We want the truth to get out there, have adult conversations again around this issue. No one is losing their home in Inglewood to build a arena. I was elected official for 12 years. Local elected, I should say. I would never take anyone's home to build any commercial development, and so no one's going to be impacted by this. I think it's a great boom again for the region. After I leave here, I'll be meeting with Steve Ballmer, the owner of the Clippers, and talking about all the plans he's going to have for a community center, a drop-in center, a health center on that site as well. So it's going to be inclusive, and it's going to be something that's going to be beneficial, not only to the city of Inglewood, but to the region as a whole. And we talk about aerospace. We know South Bay has been the hub of aerospace for over 60 years. But for a period of time, we were losing some of that. I lived right down the street from Northrop Grumman as a kid growing up, and they went away about 30 years ago. And we're fortunate enough now to have SpaceX there. And they employ 6,000 people now in this region. Some living in Torrance and Carson and Gardena, Hawthorne, Lawndale. And that's a benefit to all of us by having SpaceX there, and especially the numerous subcontractors who are now working with SpaceX. And I've seen the impact of the community again with the restaurants who are benefiting, the hotels that are benefiting from this increased business that SpaceX has brought to the community. So I'm excited about that. City of Hawthorne is now building new housing units right across the street from SpaceX. But as Senator Allen talked about, our challenges in building housing in California has a lot to do with some of our restrictions, as he stated about CEQA. And we do need reform as we deal with CEQA. And we're concerned about the environment. I don't know a single person who wants dirty air, dirty soil, or dirty water. But sometimes we let that get in the way of having common sense, sensible approaches to building housing or bringing businesses to our community. And we need to be having dialogue on how do we get beyond those boundaries and our biases when it comes to housing. One of the biggest challenges in building housing is something I voted on in 2011. Senator Allen and Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi weren't there at the time, but it was ending redevelopment. It was something that Jerry Brown was high on, ending redevelopment. And it was the promise of billions of dollars to the state of California. Well, that's never come to fruition. And it was the biggest mistake. I've never regretted one vote like I've regretted ending redevelopment. And you talk to all the local cities that used it well to build affordable housing. That tool has gone away. So we found ourselves over the last 8 years cobbling together various housing proposals on how do we kind of recreate redevelopment without really recreating it. But in essence, that's what we need. Just help spur and encourage folks, because developers were able to come in and write down dirt to build below market rate housing. That tool has gone away. So how do we bring that back? So it's going to require us to work closely with our local elected officials, because SB 50, I've heard from plenty of the residents in my district and throughout the state of California, it's a lot of challenges there. And as we said, San Francisco is not Torrance. It's not Gardena. It's not Inglewood. One size does not fit all. But we as legislators can't do it without hearing from each and every one of you. I often state, when you get elected, it doesn't come with a magic wand. A lot of folks think we can fix every problem. Far from the truth. And we see 2,500 bills on average every year. 2,500 bills. I challenge you, most of us know what our own bills do, the 20 or so that we introduce. Really. I have 20 bills running right now, and it takes everything in my day to keep up to what my bill's doing, where it is. So to say that I'm an expert on all these other ones that are running through the legislature would be lying to each other. And as we talk about, again, the CEQA and environmental challenges, one of the things that no one wants to talk about, our California Air Resources Board, a vitally important organization, an organization that's responsible for billions of dollars, but an organization that has never once been audited. Never once been audited. You guys should be concerned about that, because they regulate what you do in each and every city throughout the state, and despite the great job that they might be doing, they need to be audited. We have a cap and trade program that raises billions of dollars every year, and we have no oversight of how that money's being spent. And usually the people they tell you that benefits the most, underserved communities, black and brown communities, they never see any of those resources. So stop using them as poster childs on why we're collecting this money if they're never going to see any benefit. But if you do an audit, you'll know where that money's being spent. Nobody wants to audit the Air Board? All right, maybe I'm down the wrong track, but I think it needs to be audited. I think it's an organization that has tremendous power, but there needs to be oversight in any organization. We audit businesses. We audit DMV. We audit various departments throughout the state of California. I think that's one that needs to be audited too. One of the issues too that was in my introduction that I've been proud of is supplier diversity. It's something that I've championed since the time I got elected to City of Gardena, City Council, while I was on the legislature and chair of utilities. And it's one of great importance to not only me, but it should be great importance to each and every one of you in this room and throughout the state of California to make sure our workforce, our contracting, our procurement reflect the great diversity of the state of California. I was the one that inserted the supplier diversity language in SB1, our gas tax. I was not going to vote for the gas tax until I got a commitment from the governor to say that make sure supplier diversity is part of that. And we were able to meet with the governor at Cal State Dominguez Hills 2 years ago with 250 businesses, women-owned, minority, veteran-owned businesses, and we got the strong commitment from the governor that diversity would be part of this. And it needs to be part of anything that we're doing. I have an insurance bill going through right now that our insurance commissioner, former Senator Ricardo Lara, is supporting as well. And it's dealing with diversity and making sure those folks who do $100 million of business here in the state of California, that their boards are reflective and as diverse as the clientele that they do business with. It only makes sense. Your businesses will thrive when it looks like the communities and people that you serve. So diversity is what we're doing with that. And also, again, in the cannabis industry, making sure that if this industry is going to survive, it has to reflect all of those folks in our community throughout our state of California. An issue of some concern that the governor took a bold step on 3 weeks ago, and I stood there with them side by side, is putting a moratorium on executions in the state of California. There's currently 160 people innocently convicted, wrongly convicted, that are on death row. And until we can say we're 100% right on the death penalty, I think a timeout is the right approach to take. And I commend the governor joining 12 other states who have also put a timeout on executions, because one innocent person killed is one too many. So I encourage him. I'm encouraged by what he's doing. It's another issue of people get quiet on criminal justice reform, but it's something that we have to take a serious look at in California. One of the most controversial bills that is moving through the legislature right now is AB 392. That's the use of deadly force. And it's an issue that got out of public safety in the Assembly last week. It's coming our way pretty soon if it gets out of the Assembly House. And it's about, again, as it clearly states, the use of deadly force by law enforcement. And folks who want to make it out as an anti-cop piece of legislation, farthest thing from the truth. It's about making our communities safe, making where people are comfortable and not fearful of their life anytime they encounter law enforcement. And for some communities, they fear law enforcement. And if they fear you, then you never can serve a community that they're fearful of. So it's a common sense legislation. It's going to take a lot of courage by legislators to stand up and keep it moving, but it's one that we definitely need to have a discussion and have a dialogue on. And that's why we should be wanting to be elected officials, not to run from the difficult issues, but to address them head on and have honest conversations about those things that need to be addressed. Another one is health disparities. In the United States and in California, one of the leading nations in the world, we have some of the worst infant mortality rates in the world. We're worse than some third world countries when it comes to infant mortality in the United States and here in California. And the morbidity rate for mothers. Something's wrong with that. But know what impacts the most? African American women and babies. And we need to talk about that. How is that the case? How can more African American babies die in this country than in third world countries? Because we have implicit bias when it renders health care in this country. We have implicit biases in so many areas. And we need to have those conversations about that. So that's what I'm going to commit myself to, as long as I have a voice, as long as I have a pulpit, and as long as I have a vote, I'm going to make sure we continue to raise the issues that no one wants to talk about, because it's the elephant in the room. Anytime, when we talk about real problems and real solutions, we got to understand there are implicit biases in a lot of things that we do here. I'm excited about our governor's investment in education. He's made a strong commitment, as Senator Allen stated, to K through 12. Last year, we spent more money on education at any time in California's history. So I think Jerry Brown deserves a round of applause for that, for making that strong investment. And Gavin is making an even bolder commitment to making sure our K through 12, as well as our higher education, is funded, avoiding tuition hikes. We were able to avoid tuition hikes for our UCs and our CSUs. I have a piece of legislation also this year creating Cal grants for formerly incarcerated for community college. It's vitally important. If we want to talk about second chances, we have to believe in second chances. We just can't talk about it. We have to provide those opportunities. I've been impressed with all the individuals that I have met. We get opportunity to honor a business of the year every year. Last year, Chef Schaefer from Torrance Depot was my business of the year. This year, it's going to be a young man by the name of Jay Lee. You might have never heard of him. He owns a restaurant in Gardena called the Stinking Crawfish. He owns 7 other ones. But what makes his individuals worthy of this and show you what a second chance looks like, he was incarcerated in state prison for a number of years. Got an education while in prison. He was in prison for, he was in a car with drive-by, assault with a deadly weapon. I think someone lost their life, but he reformed himself. And he's a successful businessman owning now 8 restaurants. His most recent one just opened 2 weeks ago in Lakewood. And that's what a second chance looks like. But if we throw everybody away and says, oh, you've run afoul, you don't deserve a second chance, we're going to have more crime in our streets. So I believe in second chances, and he's a fine testament of what it looks like to give someone a second chance. And we need to utilize the system. We talk about rehabilitation. If we talk about rehabilitation, then we have to believe in rehabilitation. We have to support rehabilitation. So it's something that our governor has also spoke to, and it's something that I'm going to be encouraging, and I hope my colleagues will join me as well and making sure that we move that initiative forward. And issue of concern with Carson and Torrance is our refineries. And how do we keep them operating? How do we keep them vital? Because regardless of what our environmental beliefs are, if we shut down every refinery in the state of California, we will no longer be the 5th leading economy in the world. Believe that. We would no longer move 40% of goods and services that come through our harbor and our ports without gasoline. And regardless of how we want to have a clean environment, we all do. Again, no one wants a dirty environment, but we can't do it if we don't have gasoline, folks. We're not ready to go 100% electric trains, planes, automobiles anytime soon. So if we shut down these refineries, are people going to park their cars? No. Know what's going to happen? We're going to import from other states and from foreign countries. Our whole move from foreign oil 30 years ago was to get off foreign oil. If we shut down our refineries, we'll be back depending on foreign oil. Our economy will not be the 5th leading. So we have to, again, sit down and work out ways to allow businesses to thrive. I trust the folks who do that work every day. And we as legislators shouldn't tell them how to clean their industry. They should tell us how to clean. We should set the guidelines on what we want to do, but we should listen to the folks who are responsible for doing that. A number of years ago when I was still on Gardena City Council, we have our own transit department similar to the city of Torrance, and we went to buy some new buses. And the new buses we had looked at met every environmental standard that CARB had set forth. And they rejected the purchasing of those buses. Know why? It was diesel. Now, my understanding is CARB should be concerned with what comes out the tailpipe, not what's under the hood. But far too often we allow our personal biases or whatever we think should be the flavor of the day to get in the way. But CARB's responsibility is the emissions, not what's under the hood, but we weren't able to buy those buses. So again, these are discussions that we need to have, and we have to have adults in the room who are not afraid to tackle these subjects. And because if we don't, if we stick our head in the sand, we'll never solve any of these problems. And that's the challenge that the chamber has, that local businesses have, our local elected officials have, to raise these issues and have real dialogue. And I'm sorry, I kind of like must have been a Debbie Downer because I haven't got a single laugh like Senator Allen got out of anything. But you want to know what's going on, I'm going to tell you what's going on. So, and before I sit down, I just want to say again, I look forward to our continued work. We just saw just the other day there was going to be a potential strike at our ports again regarding automation. And we want automation. We want to make our ports as efficient as possible, but not at the sake of jobs. And that's what we have to work out. So I'm glad the mayor interceded, Mayor Garcetti, to sit down, and we're having dialogues, and we're going to make sure that we protect this industry, protect the men and women that work in this industry, but not just in this industry, throughout the state of California. I think we can do it if we put our heads together and we make a strong commitment to keep California the golden state and the 5th leading economy, if not the 4th leading economy in the world. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, as you can tell, we have a strong voice representing the Torrance community up in Sacramento. Not only someone who's willing to take on the tough issues, but I'm always a little jealous because he's typically the best dressed guy in the room. So give it up for Senator Steven Bradford. At this time, I'd like to invite up the manager from Ganal Lumber's Torrance facility. Typically, you see him in a Tommy Bahama cool shirt, as any well-dressed surfer should look. Today, looking very dapper, Tim Personius. Please come up to introduce our next speaker.
Good morning from the heart of Torrance and Ganal Lumber, back in the South Bay where I think we belong. I'd like to introduce this morning Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi. Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi represents the 66th Assembly District and currently serves as acting chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, the chairman of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, the chairman of the Assembly Select Committee on Aerospace, and member of Assembly Committees on Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials, Utilities and Energy, Veterans Affairs, and Budget. As a former prosecutor, Assemblymember Muratsuchi worked with law enforcement to write laws to crack down on sex offenders and other criminals. In 2017, he earned a 100% pro-public safety voting score from the California Police Chiefs Association. Assemblyman Muratsuchi lives here in the South Bay with his wife, Dr. Hiroko Higuchi, and their daughter, who attends a local public school. Assemblyman Muratsuchi has lived in the South Bay for over 22 years. He's a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley, and the UCLA School of Law. And he's a fellow surfer. So I'd like you to welcome Assemblyman Al Muratsuchi.
All right, good morning, everyone. I always have the pleasure and the privilege of being third in line, 3 keynote speeches in one morning, which I understand can be a little overwhelming. So let me try to just keep it brief. First of all, thank you very much for having me, as well as Senator Allen and Senator Bradford, to your annual State of the State address. As was said in the introduction, I've lived in the South Bay now for almost 25 years, almost all in Torrance. I'm a former Torrance School Board member, a former Torrance Planning Commissioner, and so I know the South Bay and specifically Torrance very well. And so, I wanted to share a little bit about some of the bills that I'm working on, which I believe reflect South Bay values, but also try to talk briefly about some of the things that I believe either Senator Allen or Senator Bradford have not already touched upon. I apologize, first of all, I came in a little late. I was too busy reading the Mueller report on the can. Exciting stuff. But here, I know the theme of the event is the state of the state, and I know that several times both senators have mentioned how we have the privilege of living in the world's 5th largest economy. And I would say overall, the state of the state is very good. You know, I was pleased a couple months ago that Cal State Dominguez Hills, they hosted their annual South Bay economic overview, their presentation and how well the South Bay economy is doing. And I was so pleased to see how the UCLA Anderson School presentation pretty much confirmed what I've been saying for many years, that, you know, California's economy is growing faster than the rest of the nation, that in the last 8 years, private sector jobs have been steadily increasing. In particular, with, as Senator Bradford indicated, we're seeing a comeback in the aerospace industry, and that the aerospace industry continues to be an important driver of the South Bay economy. So, you know, I always ask, why is California, you know, I know that so many people talk about how all the high taxes and the high regulations in California are driving businesses out of the state. Well, overall, we see that that simply is not true. The California economy as a whole is growing faster than the rest of the country, and that jobs are growing. But we know that too many people are struggling, and that, you know, in many ways, we often hear a story of two Californias. You know, the California that is doing well in the innovation economy, whether we're talking about Silicon Valley, Silicon Beach, all the innovations in biotech, aerospace, we continue to be global leaders in innovation in the aerospace industry. But at the same time, we know that we are facing these major challenges, whether it's, you know, the wildfires, threatening to, has already driven the largest utility in the country into bankruptcy, and with perhaps, you know, Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric being not too far behind. You know, that is a major challenge that we are facing in the state of California. Obviously, housing and homelessness. Both senators have talked a lot about the challenges of housing. But I want to say, you know, in terms of something that perhaps hasn't been emphasized, you know, as much as I feel, as I try to emphasize, which is that, yes, we do have a affordable housing crisis, and that ultimately I do believe that it's a question of supply and demand, that in order to make housing more affordable, we need to build more housing. But that should not come at the expense of the quality of our life, of our communities. And that's why I'm a big believer in local control. You know, I believe that, you know, as Steve Bradford said, one size does not fit all. That Sacramento should not be trying to impose a solution that would work in San Francisco, but that, you know, I don't see working for communities like Torrance, Redondo Beach, and most of the South Bay. And so I'm going to keep fighting for the South Bay to make sure that, you know, we are addressing these big issues, but at the same time making sure that we protect the quality of life that we enjoy so much living in the South Bay. But I go back to the earlier question, why is California's economy growing faster than the rest of the country when we are such a high tax, high regulation state? You know, I believe that is because of our innovation economy. And why is it that we are global leaders in innovation? That is because we have the best universities in the entire country, if not in the world. And so we need to, you know, that's why as a former Torrance School Board member, I continue to be a strong believer in the importance of investing in education, not just our universities, but our K-12 schools. One of my top legislative priorities that I'm working on, I've been working on for years with Dr. George Mannon, the superintendent of the Torrance Unified School District, as well as the superintendents throughout the South Bay, is my bill, Assembly Bill 39, which seeks to establish a roadmap to get California back to where we used to be in the top 10 in the nation in per pupil spending. You know, while the point was made that we have restored over $31 billion in education funding in the last 7 years, we're still not keeping pace with the rest of the country. California is still, depending on who you're talking to, between 41st and 44th in the nation in per pupil spending. And so we're seeing those challenges in the strikes and in the financial struggles that districts throughout the state are facing, whether it's Los Angeles Unified, Oakland Unified, Sacramento Unified is looking at being taken over by the state for fiscal insolvency. And a lot of that, frankly, is because of fiscal mismanagement. And so, that's the flip side of local control, that we want to promote local control, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we hold our local elected officials accountable to be fiscally responsible. But a big part of that is that the state needs to do more to support our K-12 schools. And that is my bill, which seeks to get California back to the top 10 of the nation in per pupil spending. I know that I've been working closely with Senator Allen on this as a co-author of the bill. But we need to continue to support our schools. This bill is supported by the California State PTA, by the teachers, by school boards, by the Torrance Unified School District, South Bay School Districts, LAUSD, and many other districts throughout the state. And I look forward to working with all of you to support our schools. Another measure that I'm working on is Assembly Bill 720, which I'm working on with El Camino President Dean Maloney, to increase funding for public safety programs. Many of you may know that community colleges, are they're the teachers, they're the educators and the trainers of so many of our professionals, including public safety professionals. And that's where, I've been working with El Camino to get $10 million last year to kick off the South Bay Public Safety Training Center, to make sure that our South Bay first responders, our firefighters, and our police officers, have the best training so that they can conduct themselves most professionally and in order to keep our neighborhoods safe. And so this is a bill that I've also been working on with Torrance Fire Chief Martin Cerna. But this is a bill to increase funding for these types of public safety training programs at El Camino and many of our other community college programs. Going back to the South Bay economy, and what continues to drive the South Bay economy is the aerospace industry. Whether we're talking about, I don't know if Northrop is here, I don't see Joe on, but I know that Northrop is one of the big supporters of the Chamber and of our South Bay Chamber activities. But whether we're talking about the big primes or whether we're talking about the large network of parts manufacturers, the small and mid-size parts manufacturers that continue to make an important part of the aerospace industry in the South Bay and Southern California, we need to make sure that we continue to stay competitive so that we continue to attract and grow and create jobs in the aerospace industry. And to that end, I have reintroduced Assembly Bill 245 to establish a California Aerospace Commission. California is not doing as well as other states in terms of really prioritizing and aggressively working to recruit and to keep the aerospace industry to continue to invest in California. In order to do that, we need statewide leadership to bring a public-private partnership together at the highest level, to bring industry leaders together with the governor and with the legislature to advise the governor and the legislature on policies, on how we can best proceed and continue to encourage greater investments in the aerospace industry right here in the state of California so that they continue to create jobs here. That is another top priority that I will continue to work on. Last but not least, small businesses. I know that Democrats are usually not associated with tax cuts, but I have a small business tax cut bill for you. Assembly Bill 308. This is a bill that I've been working on. It was inspired by a local South Bay constituent, but we started talking about why not have a tax cut for the the so-called micro businesses, businesses with gross revenues of under $250,000 a year. I tried that, but I couldn't get that bill out of committee. So what I decided to do was to focus on, small businesses, micro businesses that can be presented in a way that no one should be able to say no to, even if it's a Democrat talking about a tax cut. And this is for small businesses that are owned by our soldiers and our sailors, the men and women serving in our armed forces who are serving and being deployed overseas. And so, again, this is a modest bill, but I believe an important bill, a way of giving a tax break to give a waiver for the franchise tax for small businesses owned by our men and women being deployed while serving in the armed forces from having to pay the franchise tax. And so, the goal of my bill is to, next time I see a small business owner that's a service member, to not only say thank you for your service, but also here's a tax break from the state of California. So I believe those are some of the things that the people of the South Bay have elected me to continue to fight for. I'm always happy to help anyone out in any way I can. My local Assembly District Office is located right here in Torrance at the City National Bank building at the corner of Carson Street and Madrona. Jake Rideout is here with me, my field representative, standing in the back, a local South Bay kid that grew up in PV, and we're very happy that Jake is part of our team. So thank you very much, and hope everyone has a great day.
So again, on behalf of the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce, we have some elected officials and people you see out in the community, and they look very serious and very focused and very earnest. But as you heard earlier, when Al described why he was a little bit tardy this morning, he's got a great sense of humor, cool guy. So thank you, Al. Well, we are almost there, folks. A fantastic morning event. I wanted to say just a few words of thanks, obviously, to Senator Allen, Senator Bradford, and to Assemblymember Al Muratsuchi. Let's give it up for them, making time from their calendars and providing some insights. Our corporate sponsors today, as we recognized earlier, but once again, Kaiser Permanente, and our distinguished sponsors, Sunrider International, American Honda Motor Company, Southern California Edison, and Pelican Products. Thank you to Torrance City Cable for providing services for this event. And let's give it up to Donna and her phenomenal staff that put on another fantastic event. So I don't know if this is a commentary on the power and influence of Senator Allen, but during the program, we received notice that Sunrider International is going to be providing a 90-minute guided tour of the Chen Art Gallery. So thank you to Jonathan and his colleague, Paul McCabe, for providing that. We're going to do some group photos up front, but for everyone on the board and all of our members at the Torrance Area Chamber, thanks for coming and have a great day.